are here today to talk about why our organization's continuing to be blind to accessibility. To provide some context to this panel discussion with Mike and Mike, or Michael and Mike, um, 13% of people in the United States have some type of visual impairment. That works out to about 42 million people. Globally, there's around 285 million people with some type of visual impairment. Majority of business documents today are in PDF format, and Adobe estimates there's 2.5 trillion PDFs that are floating around the web today. So the majority of these aren't accessible. You know, when you look at research reports, they talk about websites not being accessible, and they believe only 1% of web pages across the internet are accessible today. And when you think about these folks who have to try to read or consume information and they can't, 91% of these people, and you think about this, 91% of these visually impaired people will leave a brand the first time they have an issue with a website or with a document. I mean, if that doesn't scream that businesses or organizations should be doing something for digital accessibility, I don't know what does. The last and not least is around lawsuits. You know, as everybody reads about, the number of lawsuits continues to increase around accessibility. Most years, there's over 2,000 federal lawsuits against organizations that have accessibility issues on either their website or their documents. So with that kind of context, I wanted to bring in Mike and Michael to talk about this. So Michael, given your deep involvement around accessibility and the accessibility industry with Benetech, I mean, what do you think organizations can do to address website and document accessibility?
So that's an excellent question, Barry, and thanks for that. The key thing is to get started, and you're going to hear me talk about that during the panel. Just get started. Pick a time, pick a section of your publishing house or your website or whatever it is, and begin the process. The nice thing about accessibility is that all of these standards are out there and they're easily available. The two primary drivers would be from the World Wide Web Consortium. The standard is WCAG, WCAG, and that's the Web Content Access Guidelines. So they're out there. Any competent engineer, web engineer, Java engineer, whatever, should be able to read those standards and apply it. So it's sort of the 12-step program. Admit you have a problem, pick a place to get started and go. So that would be the best thing to address from a technical standpoint. The other is the point you made, which is to recognize that there are an enormous amount of people to whom you should be providing services or could be selling things to who simply can't transact business with you or get the information you have on offer if you don't make it accessible. The standard thing we talk about is there are more people with print disabilities in the world than there are people that are left-handed. So I would hope that a business wouldn't say, I'm going to deliberately do something or not do something so that left people can effectively buy my service or read my content or understand my documents. So that should be a big motivator for them. So recognize you have a problem, get started doing something about it. Look to the standards community or experts in processing like Code Mantra and get moving.
All right. So, Mike, we just heard from Michael with respect to what to do around accessibility. You live on the side of, you're hopeful at the Viscardi Center that you're going to be receiving content that is accessible so your students can use that in a curriculum environment. So, can you provide some real world experiences? How does the Viscardi Center deal with this accessibility around digital documents and websites and educational type materials?
Sure. Thanks, Barry, for including me on this great discussion today. So it's actually been a little frustrating to obtain content that is accessible for our students. Here at the Viscardi Center, we have 180 students with a various arrays of disabilities that require customization to their accessible technology or assistive technology and the content that is provided to them. But we also have to follow the New York State guidelines of curriculum, and working with these vocational programs, there is truly not really an understanding of what accessibility is. So, and talking with some of those vision and hearing areas of those vocational programs, they don't have a clear understanding of what digital accessibility really is. And when we work with them directly, they talk about zooming in on copies of content. They talk about providing readers for individuals with disabilities who are visually impaired, which does not provide any sort of independent thinking or provide any sort of independence for that student. So it is a little bit of frustrating. But one thing that we have learned with the use of digital accessibility and assistive technology, there's one story I do want to share, is that one of our students would arrive to school every day via ambulance. She had no motor skills. She was bedridden. And what she had was the use of her eye and eyebrow and a little twitch of her finger. And what we were able to do with assistive technology using eye gaze and a communication device like a Dynavox, she was able to produce her own content. And what we did was we kind of unlocked the box for her. And she was able to write poetry, she was able to write stories, and all because of the use of technology. But there really has to be a clear understanding of what digital accessibility really is. And when it comes down to the publishers, is really offering that type of content in particular formats that can work with particular system softwares.
That's really interesting, Mike. Thank you. We're going to shift back a little bit to talk about the accessibility industry overall. And Michael, with your background, again, being around accessibility and what the Benetech organization does and all, we talked about the standards a little bit, but can you talk about some of the directives that go on as well? So as we know, there's sometimes country-specific standards, there's state standards, there's all kinds of standards out there and directives today. Can you make sense, a little bit of sense in this time to bring some clarity to this topic?
I will do my best to make a little bit of sense. First, I want to say, Mike, you and I should connect offline because Benetech, as a charity focused on making accessible content, especially for readers and learners, we may have some content available to you through the various programs that we run. So that's a separate thing, but let's connect on that. So to your question, Barry, about standards. So from a technical standpoint, again, real quick, the WCAG Web Content and Accessibility Guidelines, as well as the EPUB Accessibility 1.0 guidelines. And I say EPUB here, which is a file format for content, right? EPUB is not an accessibility format. It's just a content format, which has lots of rich accessibility data into it. Barry, earlier you mentioned the almost 3 trillion PDF documents. PDF is not an accessibility format. Adobe doesn't pretend that it is. It's a picture of a page. It's great. It does that, but it's not entirely an accessible format. Work can be done to it, and I'm sure CodeModule does some of that work, but the base to start is a format like EPUB, which is built to have additional content elements like accessibility put in. We at Benetech also have our Born Accessible standards when we go through certification, because we will certify a publisher, textbook publisher, trade publisher, whatever they are, that says that their workflow can create fully accessible content. So that's some of the standards, right? Now, what about the rules, the regulations, the guidelines? So in the United States, obviously the American with Disabilities Act covers all this. And to my knowledge, I'm not a lawyer, but to my knowledge, every university or institution that's ever been sued on ADA grounds for lack of accessible content has lost. It's basically an on-off switch. Either your content is fully accessible or it isn't. So don't wait to get sued because you're going to lose. Start making the changes right now. And this could be whether you're a county or a state doing voter information. This could be a college or university. This could be a car repair shop, whatever it is. If you're on the internet, either web page wise or downloadable content wise, and you're not accessible, if you ever do get sued, you're going to lose. Now, that's the United States set of things. There are particular things that the U.S. Department of Education runs, 508 and 504 compliance as examples to help with some of these situations. The most interesting thing that's going on right now, standards is more of a global thing. So the European Union in 2019 passed the European Accessibilities Act. So in all the member countries, and apparently the UK is going to participate anyway, even though they're no longer in the EU, it will be come January 1st, 2025, it will be illegal to produce or sell goods or services which are not accessible. So this isn't a question of I have to wait to get sued. This is just a question of you'll be violating the law. The 27 member countries will, of course, have their own local adaptations. Content and software which reads content are in those categories where they must be compliant. So those of us who work in the industry as far as creating or certifying content know 2025 is like 6 months away from you have to get everything in order and get started so you're ready by 2025. So that's a quick snapshot, Barry. We could do, half a month as opposed to half an hour on this, but that's some of the technical standards and some of the legal issues. I hope that's useful.
No, very useful. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people kind of sit off to the side and think that accessibility will take care of itself. And with these directives and initiatives going on, there's a lot of legality associated with it. So people need to pay attention to this. And with respect to that, and you kind of touched on these things, accessibility means different things to different people. We have software accessibility, we have website accessibility, and then document accessibility. And Mike, with your position as CIO, you obviously need to educate your staff in all of these so that they can understand what tools and technologies that are out there to help the students. So how do you go about educating, the team at the Viscardi Center of what's out there, what you can use, and what have you found that actually works? Now, obviously the story you said about the young lady in the wheelchair is fantastic. That's a great use of technology. But what other things have you employed that have made content accessible to your students?
Well, Barry, I think it's a cultural change that has to start at the top of the organization. And so you really need to have the C-suite buy-in and to kind of trickle down to the rest of the organization. So one other story that includes our CEO was when a few years ago when we had a student of our school where the parents were complaining that they had inaccessible homework or coursework to be able to complete at home. So we took that and said, our CEO said, from now on, there will not be any inaccessible documents leaving our organization. And that means coming from emails, that means coming from video content, that means coming from anything that can be made accessible. So with that being said, all your internal policies and procedures, your employee handbooks, all internal documents must be made accessible for all employees. We're talking about email checking. So in terms of when you send out email blasts using marketing tools, we ensure that they run through accessibility checks before we hit the send button or schedule it out. We provide assistive tech evaluations for students and staff that require it or have choose to disclose that they have a disability. And then we will provide the appropriate equipment based on the evaluations to them and also accessible materials. We work with softwares such as, like I mentioned earlier, iGaze, JAWS, NVDA, CoWriter. There's a whole slew of softwares that are out there that our staff, employees, users, students, they all use on a daily basis. But it's really, it's a cultural shift. You have to let people know, you have to educate and make people aware within your organization that, it's not it's what the person is reading from you that needs to be made accessible. Just because you may not have the disability, but the person receiving that email may have that disability. So I think it's really coming down to just educating the staff, holding in service about awareness, and actually PDF document, Word document, PowerPoint creation that is authored in an accessible format.
No, all very good points. Thank you. So To kind of wrap up the panel discussion here, guys, Michael, you've been, again, in the industry for a while around accessibility. You understand what's going on in the marketplace, how the technologies are being used, how the standards are being applied. Mike, you have been in the educational setting for 10 plus years. You've seen, I'm sure, the change in the adoption of assistive technologies. And also, kind of as a wrap up, I wanted to talk about kind of the 3 tips that you guys would give to organizations that are either just starting down this path and journey, or that maybe haven't even started it. So, Michael, I'm going to start with you. What are those 3 tips that you think everybody should know about accessibility, and regardless of where they're at in their journey?
So the first thing, I will echo what Mike said. It needs to be a organization-wide thing, whether it's a school or a county government or a corporation or whatever. Somebody has to put the flag in the ground and say, accessibility is important to us. You don't have to say out loud why, whether you're just afraid of being sued, or you'd like to do the appropriate social justice thing, or you'd like to do more business with this particular marketplace, or serve these readers better. Whatever your reason is, put the flag in the ground, name somebody, perhaps not their full-time job, but somebody as their responsibility. I'll just use the phrase chief accessibility officer, whoever that person happens to be. A lot of organizations use their CIO. A lot of publishing companies use their heads of production. Universities typically have separate disability offices, whatever this happens to be. So the first thing is, decide you're going to do it for real. Put a flag in the ground and say, by this day, we're going to be there. I mean, Ford just came out and said by 2050, their entire production line of vehicles is going to be carbon neutral. Now, 2050 is a long time away, but Ford's a gigantic organization, and they put the flag in the ground. So I'm not saying wait till 2050. I'm saying you should already be doing this because it's already against the law. But the point is, get started, give someone the responsibility of chief accessibility officer, and get them the resources they need, primarily in training and understanding, but then also in tools. So that's number 1. Number 2, pick a point moving forward. I heard Mike say, hey, nothing that we create at the Viscardi Center is going out, and nothing that we distribute, whether we create it or not, is going to go out until it's checked for accessibility. That's a great place to start. If you're a publisher or an online content creator, say, after this day, nothing we're going to distribute is going to be inaccessible. If you're a university or a government or whatever you happen to be, say, we will not do business with people who do not send us accessible content and accessible software. So pick that date, stick to that date, and get moving forward. The third thing is, tap into the significant network of people who think about this all the time, right? So I think about this all the time. I'm sure Mike, if not all the time, thinks about this most of the time, right? There's lots of us out here doing it. There are organizations, I'm going to name a few, which are all nonprofits, charities, whatever. Benetech, certainly. We've been doing this for 20 years. We've got over almost 1 million accessible titles available to our members, et cetera, as well as other programs that we have to work to help people create accessible content. There's the National Federation for the Blind. There's the DAISY Consortia, Worldwide Accessibility Consortia. So there's lots of organizations out there who care about this and think about this all the time. So wherever you are on the scale, you can tap in, learn from what these people have already done, take advantage on it, stand on their shoulders, shorten your time to accessibility, and end up creating content which is fully accessible. I want to close with the notion that when you create fully accessible content, it's not just for the print disabled user. A fully accessible EPUB file is a better reading and learning experience for all users. There's very rich data inside of there, which can be mined by Google to surface things from inside of your book or inside of your documents that wouldn't come up in a normal search. There's also additional details on images, charts, graphs, those kinds of things. So when you start making EPUB, accessible EPUB files or content, you're making better content for anybody who's going to interact with that content.
Excellent. Thank you. And Mike, your top 3 tips?
Sure. There's one thing I do want to say is that this is an ever-growing population of people that have vision loss and disabilities. So, one of the latest statistics that we saw was that over 21 million adults have non-correctable vision loss. So if you're thinking about, with your business case, look at that, look at that, all that potential business that is out there. Just 21 million adults with non-correctable vision loss that could be purchasing your product, surfing your website, accessing videos, using audio description or closed captioning and so forth. So, again, I would definitely, if we're have a business and we have a website that you're going through a refresh or you have to retrofit, definitely also always include accessibility at the forefront, because it's not just a legal, compliance issue that is there, but it's also a massive business case there as well. I would say that, also always include accessibility statements on your websites. I would say that showing, putting that out there, like you said, putting that flag in the ground saying, this is what our organization is doing. Work with us. We provide accessible content, et cetera. And then also I would say always provide awareness, always educate your staff. We're all willing to learn. We all want to know what works, what doesn't work, and let's correct it, and let's make sure that we can provide goods and services to anyone that accesses our site and products.
Excellent. Well, Mike and Michael, thank you very much for joining me on the panel discussion today, and really appreciate your insights and all the tips and tricks for addressing accessibility.